He had barely set his bags down when the apartment shimmered with a soft, iridescent glow, and two figures appeared as if plucked from a human fashion magazine, tall, perfectly proportioned, faceless silhouettes that radiated a sort of otherworldly charm. "Greetings, human," one said, voice smooth like liquid chrome. "We are here to study you," the other added with mock seriousness. "Every inch, every curve, every reaction. You are our latest specimen of fascination." The human blinked. He'd expected roommates, maybe a stray cat, not alien sisters obsessed with human anatomy. Study me?" he asked, cautiously placing his hand on his chest, hoping that would convey consent without commitment. They didn't notice, already circling him like scientists inspecting a priceless artifact, their fingers hovering near his shoulders as if contemplating a measuring tape that didn't exist. "Firm. Fascinating. Unusually firm," said the first sister, poking his bicep with exaggerated precision. "Note the tension under pressure. Does it always respond this way?" The human's reflexive flinch turned into a groan, and they exchanged an approving glance, mistaking embarrassment for remarkable scientific compliance. "Observe the stability." The second sister ran her fingers along his arm in an almost absurdly meticulous manner. "So consistent. So rigid. How can a human maintain such perfection?" "I'm fine," he stammered, his voice cracking. The sisters giggled, a sound like glass wind chimes, and argued briefly over who had the better observational technique. "You call that fine? It's exceptional. Look at the way every muscle reacts. Pish-posh, my method captures the nuance." He flinched. That flinch tells the story of the underlying tension. The human wasn't sure if they were debating his body or his sanity, and a blush crept across his face as he tried to retreat politely. "Let's measure the sensory response next," one said, reaching for his forearm. "Just a preliminary touch," the other whispered under her breath. "Careful, or we'll have more than data to record." The human froze. That sounded suspiciously like a threat, or a promise, he couldn't tell which. When she touched him, his reaction was immediate and involuntary, a startled shiver that made them both step back in faux disappointment. "Ah, complex variable," the first sister muttered. "Interesting. Unexpected." They began a methodical, almost ritualistic tour of his body, hands hovering over elbows, shoulders, neck, without ever actually showing their faces. Every accidental nudge, groan, or shiver became a data point, and their notes, filled with euphemistic symbols and indecipherable alien shorthand. Reaction peak at 3 o'clock. Fascinating. Heightened sensitivity in the dorsal region. Perhaps indicative of human thrill response, said one, scribbling notes with invisible pens that glimmered in midair. The human attempted conversation as a defensive mechanism. "So, you do this to every human you meet?" He tried to sound casual but ended up squeaking in protest when the other sister poked his side for measurement calibration. They laughed. No. Only the most perfect specimens," they said in unison, eyes, or where eyes would be, twinkling with absurd fascination. "You are the pinnacle of firmness." Firmness, they repeated like a mantra, each syllable dripping with mock solemnity and unintentional innuendo. The human's attempts at modesty collided with their relentless curiosity. He tried sitting down, they tilted his chair, adjusted his posture, and whispered notes about alignment and resistance. His protests grew more vocal. I'm just human." "Precisely," they cooed. "A marvel of natural construction. Every inch, every contour, data incomplete if not observed firsthand." By the time the sun dipped behind the horizon, they had catalogued his reactions like a cross between zealous scientists and gleeful pranksters. The human leaned against the wall, cheeks burning, while they debated whether tomorrow's session should include full body calibration, or if today's results were sufficient. "We need more," one insisted. "Every centimeter must be quantified." "For science, of course," added the other, smirking at the human's mortified expression. He wondered if he should run, hide, or just surrender to the chaos that had taken over his apartment. The alien sisters had already marked him as their latest obsession, and there was no polite way out. Tomorrow promised more research, more accidental exposure, and more of those maddening comments about his perfectly firm, human form. He sighed, realizing he was not just the subject but the centerpiece of an intergalactic comedy of errors. The next morning, the human woke to the soft hum of alien energy filling the apartment. The sisters were already circling him, instruments floating in midair like obedient pets, each device labeled with alien glyphs that somehow made the words, sensation analysis, look innocent and terrifying at once. Ready for the next phase of research? One asked, tone perfectly calm, eyes, where eyes would be, glinting with anticipation. Absolutely necessary to quantify every inch, added the other, tugging at the hem of his shirt with curious precision. He tried to protest, rubbing his arms. I think I've already contributed enough data yesterday. They ignored him, beginning their methodical examination. The first device hovered over his bicep, emitting soft pulses. Noticeable tension spike at minimal pressure, one whispered. The human flinched reflexively, and both sisters scribbled notes, frantically. Fascinating, one said, smirking. Peak response corresponds perfectly with, oh my, as another accidental nudge pressed him in a sensitive spot. Stability test now, the second sister announced, pressing her hands briefly against his shoulders. The human's groan echoed like a minor catastrophe. Unintentional variables, but highly revealing, one sister muttered, eyes darting between the floating instruments. Each accidental movement became data, each reaction a note of triumph or curiosity. Their precision was absurd, but so was the human's capacity to react in ways they couldn't predict. They moved on to flexibility testing, guiding him into positions that were optimal for data collection. He toppled sideways, flailing limbs and bumping against floating gadgets. Interesting, resistance increases when posture is compromised, one sister noted seriously. And reaction intensity, off the charts, the other added with a playful hiss. The human gasped, mortified, as they continued, apparently unable to distinguish between a normal human response and a spectacularly suggestive one. Double entendres flew like sparks. Notice how the extremities respond to tension, one said, tracing invisible lines across his arms. Yes, the responsiveness under mild stress is remarkable, the other added, brushing against his side by accident. Stress-induced expansion, she whispered, and both laughed, ignoring his panicked flush. Human physiology is more interesting than we anticipated. The human tried to retreat, stepping backward, but the floating devices shifted to follow him, as if sensing his body was the key to some cosmic puzzle. One sister pouted. You move too quickly, human. We need consistency. He stammered. I'm trying. I mean, another accidental nudge, and he groaned again. They scribbled notes, oblivious to the double meaning. Reaction amplitude under sudden displacement, excellent, one said. They debated methods, teasing each other relentlessly. I think my approach captures the subtle tremors better, one said, poking his forearm. Pa! Tremors? You call that subtle? My touch induces measurable microreactions you can't even detect. The human rolled his eyes, or at least tried to, caught between laughter and embarrassment as he realized he was the center of an intergalactic sibling rivalry. Next came sensory mapping. Their fingers traced along his arms, chest, and waist in careful patterns, and every time he shivered, twitched, or let slip a startled gasp, they documented it with exaggerated seriousness. High response frequency here, unexpected, one said, eyes widening in mock alarm. Perhaps the data is too significant, whispered the other, giggling at the human's mortification. Every inch must be accounted for, one insisted, floating closer, almost hovering. The human stumbled, losing balance, arms flailing. I'm fine. I can stand, he protested, wobbling. Ah, resilience under accidental pressure, the sisters chorused, scribbling furiously. Each flinch, shiver, and accidental brush became a highlight of their notes. The human realized his polite attempts at cooperation were interpreted as record-breaking endurance. By midday, chaos had escalated to new heights. Instruments beeped, hummed, and glowed erratically, human groans punctuated by alien laughter. Every reaction, intended or not, became crucial data. The sisters argued briefly over methodology superiority, each trying to claim credit for the human's reactions. He leaned against the wall, exhausted, whispering, "Please, no more experiments today." "Nonsense," one said, tapping him lightly on the chest. "The research has just begun." Despite his protest, he couldn't help noticing the absurdity of being the star of their interstellar obsession. Between the nudges, accidental touches, and teasing commentary, the lines between science, seduction, and sheer ridiculousness blurred. He sighed, realizing he was utterly at their mercy, and somehow, that made the next phase of experimentation even more terrifying, and hilariously inevitable. By mid-afternoon, the human was exhausted, yet the alien sisters had only grown more energetic, their curiosity bordering on manic obsession. Floating instruments whirred and shimmered around him, beeping and pulsing as if alive, all programmed to document the perfect firmness of every inch of his body. "We require comprehensive calibration," one said, voice silky and precise. "Full body measurements. No centimeter unexamined." The human blinked slowly, realizing he had become both test subject and unwilling star of their intergalactic comedy. The sisters moved in synchronized precision, adjusting his posture, lifting limbs, and probing with instruments that hummed against his skin in ways he could barely comprehend. Each accidental touch sent involuntary shivers through him, each gasp recorded meticulously in alien shorthand. "Reaction amplitude, maximal," one murmured, scribbling in midair with glowing pens. "Highly sensitive response patterns," added the other, brushing against his side again, ignoring his mortified flinch. Attempting to escape was futile. The floating devices followed his slightest movement, tethered to the sisters' commands. When he stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet, one sister sighed. "Immobility under duress is necessary for accurate readings," she scolded playfully. The other leaned closer, whispering, "Or we'll have to induce it ourselves." And the human's blush deepened as he realized how literal their fascination had become. They argued over methodology, poking him in competing patterns, each touch intended as data collection but triggering hilariously suggestive reactions. "My technique measures microtremors more accurately," one insisted, sliding her hands along his arms. "Microtremors? Please! You ignore the macrosensitivity here," the other countered, brushing along his chest. The human squeaked, caught between laughter and embarrassment, as he felt like a puppet in a sibling rivalry that revolved entirely around his body. Next, they introduced a series of bizarre alien gadgets, vibrating probes, glowing pads, stretchy measuring tubes, all calibrated to amplify his responses for precise analysis. The human flailed helplessly, limbs entangled in floating cords and pads that hummed against his skin, each accidental shift eliciting a chorus of notes from the sisters. "Unexpected vibration resonance," one squealed. "Amplitude exceeds predicted parameters," the other added, giggling. His groans echoed like alarm bells, only fueling their delight. Every involuntary reaction became data. Every blush, gasp, and stumble meticulously documented. They circled him like predators disguised as scientists, murmuring praise about his perfect firmness, in ways that sounded disturbingly flirtatious. "Observe how the dorsal region responds to pressure," one said, pressing lightly along his back. "Exquisite feedback," the other whispered, brushing against his side in a motion that was both accidental and pointed. The humans' protests were drowned in laughter, scribbled notes, and their relentless commentary. Their playful rivalry intensified, hands darting, floating instruments adjusting, and their voices overlapping with teasing remarks. "I believe my observation is superior," one claimed. "Your methodology lacks subtlety," the other retorted, flicking a finger across his bicep. The human's face was flushed crimson, caught in the middle of a scientific duel that doubled as interstellar adult comedy. In the midst of this chaos, he realized he was learning a new kind of endurance, the bizarre combination of patience, embarrassment, and accidental pleasure as the aliens debated, measured, and misinterpreted his every move. He tried to cover himself, tried to escape, tried to speak, but every attempt triggered more commentary and documentation. "Full-body data collection complete?" he wheezed, barely standing. "Not nearly," one said, circling him like a shark with a clipboard. "We must validate every inch." The human collapsed onto a chair, tangled in cords, gadgets, and his own exhaustion, while the sisters hovered over him, jubilant. "Most exceptional specimen," one said with delight. "Truly, a marvel of human construction," added the other. Each accidental motion, each inadvertent flinch, had become a victory in their obsessive cataloging, a testament to both their scientific rigor and the absurdity of intergalactic adult humor. He sighed, realizing that his life had become a continuous loop of chaotic testing, playful teasing, and relentless commentary, with no clear way out. And yet, somewhere deep in his flustered confusion, he couldn't help but laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of it all, knowing that tomorrow would bring even more experiments, more chaos, and inevitably, more of those maddeningly precise compliments about his perfectly firm human form. By evening, the human was slumped against the wall, tangled in cords, floating instruments, and the aftermath of relentless measurements, yet the alien sisters were practically vibrating with energy, eyes, where eyes would be, gleaming with satisfaction. "Remarkable endurance," one said, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, though in a way that made him blush violently. "Every inch accounted for," added the other, hovering slightly closer than necessary, scribbling glowing notes in midair. The human groaned. "I've contributed enough data for a lifetime." "Lifetime is insufficient," one replied, tilting his chin with one delicate, gloved finger. "We require post-mortem verification." The human froze, certain for a moment that she had literally meant it, only to have her giggle ripple through the room. "We mean, metaphorically. More measurements, of course." The double entendre hung in the air like a teasing challenge, and he groaned again, rubbing his temples. They began reviewing the day's data, comparing notes on his reactions, each comment dripping with playful rivalry. "Your methods induced higher micro-responses," one said, glancing at her sister. "Pfft, induced nothing. I merely observed natural human perfection," the other shot back, tracing a finger along his arm in demonstration. The human flinched, muttered a protest, and both sisters laughed, recording the reaction as though it were the most significant metric of the day. Even in their analysis, adult humor flourished. "Notice how he responds to minor pressure along the dorsal ridge," one whispered. "Such exquisite feedback under minimal stimulus," said the other, nudging him lightly to confirm her point. The human gasped, half in embarrassment, half in disbelief, realizing that every reaction he had offered all day had become a trophy in their interstellar scientific duel. "Perhaps he should be awarded for compliance," one suggested, voice dripping with mock gravity. The other tilted her head. "Or for endurance under duress." The human groaned audibly, slumping further against the wall. Their playful teasing was relentless, oscillating between scientific rigor and flirtatious commentary, leaving him wondering if he was a research subject or a contestant in the galaxy's most absurd adult game show. The human tried a weak attempt at humor. "So, do I get a certificate or a medal for this?" Both sisters leaned in, considering the idea with exaggerated seriousness. "Certificates are irrelevant," one said. "But a medal of merit for perfect human firmness could be entertaining," the other added, brushing against his side as if demonstrating how the medal might fit. The human groaned, realizing that even jokes could not save him from their relentless focus. Despite exhaustion, there was a strange camaraderie forming. He laughed, albeit nervously, at their over-the-top obsession, while they bickered over methodology and observation notes. "I did most of the measurements," one claimed. "Nonsense! My calibration induced the most accurate response," the other countered, fingers lightly grazing his shoulder. His blush deepened, realizing that he was simultaneously the prize, the tool, and the laughingstock of this interstellar experiment. Dark humor crept in seamlessly, masked by laughter. "If he escapes, we must clone him," one whispered conspiratorially. "Backup specimens are crucial," the other added with a sly smirk. The human groaned audibly, imagining a small army of himself in identical embarrassing positions, each one a testament to alien obsession and their twisted sense of humor. Finally, the sisters floated back, instruments retracting as if satisfied, though the human could tell their minds were already scheming tomorrow's adventures. "Sufficient data for today," one said, voice soft yet teasing. "But there is always room for further observation." The other nodded, tracing an imaginary line along his chest. "Every inch, every reaction, documented, for future reference." The human collapsed onto the floor, exhausted, mortified, yet oddly exhilarated by the chaos. He laughed weakly, shaking his head. "I can't believe this is my life now," he muttered. The sisters shared a glance, mischievous and gleeful, knowing full well that their obsession was far from over. The data was complete, for now. Tomorrow would bring more experiments, more chaos, and inevitably, more comments about his perfectly firm human form. He sighed, realizing that in the galaxy's eyes, he was the pinnacle of human construction, and hilariously, hopelessly at their mercy.